So, good evening. Today I'm gonna read a talk from the book named Heartwood of the Bodhi Tree by Ajahn Buddhadasa. The talk's name is Practicing with Voidness, which was given on January 21st, 1962. I remember I have read this talk when I was 22, and it strike a chord with me. The talk is a bit too long for me to read within half an hour, so I'm gonna start reading from the middle of the talk. Nothing whatsoever should be clung to as I or mine. Practicing with voidness. It is important to understand various methods of practice, but these methods also must be explained together with the opportunities and occasions for practice. We will consider 3 occasions or times for practice. At quote-unquote ordinary times, at moments of sense contact through the 6 sense doors, and the moment of physical death, when the mind quote-unquote goes out. How should we practice on the first occasion? At times when there's no particular association with sense objects, these quote-unquote ordinary times occur when we are doing some kind of work alone and unconcerned. Perhaps we are performing our daily tasks, practicing some kind of formal meditation, reading a book in our spare time, or even thinking about something, yet the mind is undisturbed by sense contact. At such times, our practice must be the study and realization of how things are void. When there are no problems due to sense contact, how is the mind void? How is it not deluded by everything? Think about it. Study it for yourself, ask others about it, and discuss it regularly. Keep working on it continuously. Not worth having. There's another way to practice that is particularly suited to lay people who have never been ordained or have never studied the scriptures. It's straightforward enough even for those who cannot read at all. However, its aim is the same as that of other methods, to know sunyata. Sunyata means voidness. To know sunyata of all things. The method is to observe whether there's anything worth having or being. Ordinary people ought to live examining whether anything is worth having, getting, or being. Quote-unquote having and getting refers to getting silver and gold, gaining wealth, gaining possessions, getting prestige, or getting power. What is worth having or worth getting? Being a human being, being an animal, being a millionaire, being a beggar, being a king, being a citizen, being a celestial being. What sort of being is worth being? First, we must understand the words to have, to get, and to be correctly. These words directly refer to grasping and clinging. They must be grasping at some time. They must be grasping at something if we are to take it as ours. In order to fulfill the meaning of the words having and getting, for instance, suppose we pile up diamonds and jewels so they fill a room, but there's no clinging to them, no feeling of I got or I am the owner. It would be the same as if there were no having or getting. The pile of precious stones would sit there without any meaning. But if feeling of grasping at I occurs, the feeling that I've got them or I have made them mine, then this would constitute having or getting. Please understand these words in this way. I will ask again, what is there worth having? What is there worth gaining? What is there to have that will not cause its owner suffering? Every single existing thing will burn up its owner, will pierce, strangle, and entangle him, will dominate and oppress him, should he start to have or to be. But should the precious stones be piled up while he has no feeling or having or being, then there would be no burning, entangling, or strangling of any kind. This is called not having and not being. So what is there that will not be dukkha once it is become or gotten. One does a feeling of having or being. We don't have to be in the room with these jewels. We can be in the forest or in another country on the other side of the world, and the mind will still experience dukkha. Try having children grow up and live in a foreign country. You will see that if you still cling to I and mine, they will be able to give you sleepless nights, or even a nervous breakdown, in spite of the fact that they are far away. This is the exact meaning of having and being. Doerless doing, or doing without a doer. Please make it a habit to regularly contemplate what is worth having and what is worth being. What is there which, once possessed or become, will not cause dukkha? When we discover the truth that there is absolutely nothing worthy of feeling of having and being, we become even-minded towards all things. Whatever action we perform, be it arranging, having, collecting, using, or whatever, we just do what needs to be done. So don't let the mind have or become. Don't feel the sense of I get, I am, or I have. Keep in mind the Dhamma principle of doerless doing. The doing is done, but no doer can be found. The path has been walked to its end, but no walker is there. This verse refers to the Arahant, the one who has practiced Dhamma, who has walked the noble path to its very end and reached Nibbana with no walker or practitioner to be found. The principle of doerless doing must be taken up and utilized in our daily lives, whether we are eating, sitting, lying down, standing, walking, consuming, using, seeking, or whatever. We must have enough sthipanya to prevent the feelings of I am, the doer, the eater, the walker, the sitter, the sleeper, the user. This keeps the mind constantly void of ego, so that sunyata is natural state, and we live with the awareness that there's nothing worth having or being. Dhamma can be practiced in conjunction with our daily tasks and the movements that they entail. And this is an extremely high level of Dhamma practice. There's no need to separate Dhamma from everyday life. Just have this mindfulness and ready wisdom of sati sampajanya, of doerless doing. Not only will the work be successful and free from error, but at the same time, the Dhamma will develop and grow exceedingly. Doerless doing is to live naturally and ordinarily in not having and not gaining. Not worth being. Quote unquote, being is even easier. Consider what one might be that will not be dukkha. This can be a formula of reflection. It is an essential point. What is there to be which will not be dukkha? The word being, just as with the words having and gaining, refers only to the being that is accompanied by upadana, being that includes grasping and clinging to I am. For example, if a room is piled full of gold, but we don't feel we are the owner, there's no gaining or having and no being. Although legal ownership rights and worldly social conventions have a certain validity in our true hearts, we shouldn't be misled into taking those relative truths as absolute. For instance, when a people gives birth to a child, it is natural that the one who gives birth is the mother, and the one born is the child. However, if one doesn't attach to being mother, one wouldn't be a mother. Because one delusively presumes oneself to be a mother, one becomes one. We should regard this as an animal instinct, and animals feel like mother chickens, mother dogs, or mother cows. They feel themselves to be mothers and naturally love their young. They didn't create, force, or nurture such feelings. These are instincts natural to animals. To reach the level of mindfulness and wisdom, one must do better than that. One must know how to destroy the grasping and clinging that arises from such ignorance. Now, some people will think, how cruel and heartless not to let us feel ourselves to be mothers. Wouldn't you let us love our children? Please listen carefully. It isn't the meaning at all. It is possible to be a mother and perform a mother's duties with stipanya. It's not necessary to act with desire and attachment, which bring on every kind of dukkha. With dukkha, tears will flow, heart will be dry and anxious, and there will not be any joy. The suffering is indeed the price of not knowing how to be a mother, of being a mother in a way that does not conform with Dhamma. Such is dukkha of mothers. When one is a mother, one must have the dukkha of a mother. When one is a child, one must have the dukkha of a child. When one is father, one must have a dukkha of father. Try asking yourself, is being their mother a pleasure? Is being their father any fun? Those of you old enough to have had a full experience of parenthood, think over what it's like. How will you answer? Even if you don't say anything outright, probably every one of you will shake your heads. Is being a mother any fun? Is being a father a pleasure? It is something that you should study regularly and naturally. Be conscious of it at the times when the mind is not occupied with sense contact. It is a pleasure being a husband. It is fun being a wife. Think of it for yourselves. Those who have fully experienced what it is to be husbands and wives will all shake their heads. It is enjoyable being female. It is pleasure being male. If your mindfulness and wisdom is developed step by step and becoming increasingly refined, you will all shake your heads. To be female is to have the dukkha of a female. To be male is to have the dukkha of a male. It is enjoyable being a child. It is fun being an adult. Young children will probably say, yes, it's fun. We who are now adults, who are now old enough, should look back and ask ourselves, was it really a pleasure? Children have the dukkha of children and adults have the dukkha of adults, as long as there's grasping and clinging. To be anything that has an opposite, or to be nothing at all, which is better? To be an ordinary person, to be a denizen of hell, are they worth it? Is being a human worth it? Is being an animal worth it? Is worth being this person who you are? Or is it worth being a celestial being or deva in a heaven? These questions provide measures of a person's mindfulness and wisdom, of whether or not one sees grasping and clinging fully and rightly. Those who have thoroughly seen the painful consequences of grasping and clinging will shake their heads in the same way. Because being a person, one must have the dukkha of a person. Being a deva, one must have the dukkha of a deva. If we avoid not taking ourselves to be anything at all, then we are neither a person nor a deva. And the respective dukkha of each is absent. If one is a human being or a deva following the urging of grasping and clinging, it is a pleasure. Those who have realized the truth will all shake their heads. Fold again. To bring it in more closely, it is worth being a good person? It is worth being a bad person? If we ask who wants to be a good person, there's likely to be a forest of raised hands. Such people don't yet see that attachment to being a good person means one must have the good person's source of dukkha in exactly the same way that a bad person will have the dukkha appropriate to a bad person. When there's grasping and clinging at being, then there's no happiness at all. This is due to one source of heaviness or another, which is intrinsic to that state of being itself. Some kinds of dukkha do not show themselves openly because pleasures or distractions that cover them up. Nevertheless, because we are fooled by those pleasures and distractions, we must endure dukkha of having, being, and gaining, the dukkha of ambitiously and excitedly striving to be this and that. In truth, nature fools us into taking on dukkha. An obvious example is the dukkha that arises from propagating the species and from giving birth. It fools us so much that people actually volunteer enthusiastically for such labor. If they are to see the truth for themselves, they will never play with these deceptions of nature. It is fun being a good person. It is pleasant being a bad person. Think about it. Coming even closer, is it worth being a fortunate person? Is it worth being an unfortunate person? The hasty and uncircumspect are likely to raise their hands immediately, claiming that being fortunate is extremely pleasant. But those who have fully experienced good fortune will shake their heads. One who is fortunate must endure the dukkha of one who attaches to being fortunate. In exactly the same way that the one who is unfortunate must endure the dukkha appropriate to one who cannot bear to be unfortunate. Being happy. Coming closer still, it is worth being a happy person? It is worth being an unhappy person? There will be a forest of raised hand here, all asking to be happy people. On the other hand, those who have been happy, who have fully experienced the happiness others are clamoring for, will shake their heads. They know that the happy person endures the dukkha or happiness. You may not understand this point, so let me repeat. People who are happy must experience the dukkha of happy people. You must notice that worldlings assume, establish, and attach to the conventions concerning the nature of happiness. One who has money, power, influence, wealth, all the sensual pleasures, and all the such things is a happy person. But if we look closely, we will see that there's a kind of dukkha appropriate to happy people. These kinds of happiness have hidden quote-unquote fish bones in them. Even with more subtle forms of happiness that arise from concentration or samadhi, the meditative attainments or samapatti, and the meditative absorptions or jhanas. If the feeling that I am happy arises, then it too will form a fishbone in the flesh of that happiness, and will stick in one's throat. Those who grasp at and cling to the happiness of the jhanas and attainments suffer accordingly. Consequently, there's a teaching of renouncing lust for form or rupa raga and lust for the formless arupa raga, which are the first two of the higher fetters or sangyojana that prevent people from being arahants. If there's clinging to the idea that we have happiness, even if it is the happiness that arises from Dhamma, there will still be a refined kind of fishbone sticking in the throat, and the true Dhamma cannot be discerned. Grasping at Nibbana as being myself or my happiness is impossible. One may say, if one wishes, that Nibbana is the supreme happiness, and then attach to Nibbana as being I or mine. One may say, I have the happiness of Nibbana, or I have attained Nibbana. But these are mere verbalizations. In fact, one who still grasps and clings cannot possibly realize Nibbana. If anyone takes himself to be the enjoyer of Nibbana's happiness, that can only be a counterfeit Nibbana. True Nibbana is not a nature of that can be grasped at in this way. So we pursue many types of happiness, from that of children, through the happiness of youth, of adults, of the elderly, of the powerful and influential, on up through the happiness of being a deva, of having meditative absorptions and attainments, until we reach whatever we believe to be the highest happiness. If we ever delusive consider that I'm happy, we must suffer accordingly. Those who have realized the truth see this fact. Those who have not are in turmoil, ambitiously and hungrily strive for wealth, power, and sense pleasures, or on a higher level, they are greedily striving for insight, meditative absorptions, and attainments. Some push so hard they end up in mental hospital. That in itself demonstrate the danger of grasping and clinging to happiness. Young children will not understand this point, but those advanced in years should. Birth and death. Now we will give some thought to another pair of opposites. Is being born a pleasure? Is dying a pleasure? Choose one or the other. Which is more fun, being born or dying? Which is more worthwhile, being a born person or being a dead person? But being a dead person, if we really understand Dhamma, we will shake our heads. We will want neither birth nor death. However, ordinary people don't want to die. They only want to be born. They want birth without death. And what is more, they want eternal life. Or if they must die, they want to be reborn. This indeed is grasping and clinging. In short, the person born suffers one way, and the person dying suffers another way. Only when there's neither birth nor death, when there's sunyata, will there be the end to the dukkha. Why not amuse yourself by thinking this over when you are lying down, sitting, or walking, in the moments when no sense object has made contact, or when you are doing something or being something? Why not trying thinking in the way we have described? When you're weary, exhausted, and distressed with being a mother, father, or something else, why don't you ever feel that it isn't much fun? Being a husband, being a wife, being any of the things that I've mentioned. When you are disturbed and upset by that state of being, why don't you ever feel it to be utterly unpleasant? You still find it enjoyable even when it brings you to tears. It is a final pair to consider, birth and non-birth. We must reflect and investigate carefully that both birth and non-birth are too much trouble, for neither is void and free. If we cling to not being born, this clinging too is not void or sunya. This part concerning birth and non-birth, the final pair, is the hardest to understand and the hardest to practice. We must want neither birth nor non-birth. Through not grasping at or clinging to either of them, there is voidness. Having spoken continually about having and being, of not having and not being, we come to birth and non-birth. Almost immediately, we grasp at non-birth. Thus, at the final stage, our practice must advance to the point where our knowledge of non-birth dissolves without becoming an object of grasping and clinging. Then there appears true sunyata, in which there is neither birth nor non-birth. In other words, true non-birth, the remainderless quenching. This manner of speaking may seem to be quibbling or wrestling back and forth, but the meaning is unequivocal. There's a definite difference between true and false non-birth. So don't cling to the idea that Nibbana is non-birth and is wonderful and amazing in this and that way. And don't attach to the cycles of birth and death, or what the samsara, as a plethora of fun-filled birds. There must be no grasping at or clinging to either side for there to be sunyata and genuine non-birth. The practice during ordinary times must continually be of this nature. The special mention should be made of the higher work of meditation or kammatthana, mental development through the power of concentration, or samadhi bhavana, or contemplation leading to insight, vipassana. These three terms refer to systematic techniques for understanding the painful consequences of grasping and clinging. Yet this practice still falls under the category of quote-unquote ordinary times, especially in the sense that our practice comes down to being void of attachment. If we still cling to the quote-unquote meditator, it isn't really a meditation yet. In proper meditation, however, the mind isn't disturbed by sense objects, so don't let yourself be born as a meditator. Instead, see the voidness of meditation.
I believe it's said that Luang Cha, he had the only tapes he had under his kuti were Ajahn Buddhadasa tapes. So he had a lot of respect for Ajahn Buddhadasa, and Also, the Wat Pah Pong chanting book is from Wat Suan Mok, or Ajahn Buddhadasa's monastery. And the translations, those are from Pali Jatai, those are Ajahn Buddhadasa translations, I believe. Is that right? Yeah.
So in the last line that Ajahn Kai said was, instead of being the meditator, see the voidness in meditation. I don't know if you can speak a little bit more on that, some clarification would be nice.
Can you read that again?
So don't let yourself be born as a meditator. Instead, seek the voidness of meditation.
Yeah, I think it speaks to that teaching of don't be anything at all. So like when the thing with the Westerners, we're always wondering, should we be an arhat or a bodhisattva? So somebody asked that Luang Por Cha, and he said, don't be an arhat, don't be a bodhisattva, don't be anything at all. So it's that idea of creating a sense of self. So I am a meditator. The voidness is voidness of self, voidness of I. So it's not like an etheric voidness, but it's the sunyata, the emptiness is the emptiness of I am, or it's the emptiness of me and mine. So defining oneself as a meditator is like being born as a meditator. Okay, I was this person before, I went to parties and raves before, and now I'm not that you did that, but we went, but now I've come to the monastery, now I am a meditator, and I am practicing. So we take rebirth in these, he's saying even a wholesome type of rebirth is to be seen as void. I am a monk, born as a monk. That's another type of self. So, but then one of the themes that's also kind of, Luang Por Buddhadasa didn't really touch on it in that talk, but it's been in a lot of the readings, and Abhayagiri, Luang Por Cha, and so on, is the heart ordination. So like the voidness, the realization of voidness would be like the monk inside, or that's the true ordination. So whatever we become, whether we're a meditator or a monk or a nun or whatever, we're looking at that insight into and the abandonment of the I, me, and mine. That's the internal ordination that we're looking for. That's where the real meditator, that's where the real monk or nun is. Nobody has any doubts? No suffering? Yeah. Whatever's coming up. Yeah.
So kind of on that same line, how do you not get swayed then with like how your practice is going? Like I find that if your practice is going well, then it's nice to have like good moods come around that, and then when your practice is going bad, vice versa. So yeah. Yeah,
that's a very good question. Is how do we know when our practice is going well, or if our practice isn't going well, or if we're making progress, or if we're not making progress? These different signposts. So that's that question could be answered in many different ways, and I think I'll try to answer it in terms of Ajahn Buddhadasa's teaching, which is the signpost is how much I, me, and mine is there in the practice. And when I know Ajahn Jayasaro also had a good answer for this question, which was, it's not how many great states of samadhi you're getting. It's not the that shows how well your practice is going, and it's not the states of suffering that show how bad your practice is going. Sometimes when we're very blissful and great, we think it's a good sign, but actually it's not a good sign. And sometimes when we're suffering a lot, we think it's a bad sign, but it's actually a good sign because maybe we're dealing with things we wouldn't otherwise deal with if we weren't practicing. So the real hallmark, the real signpost to see if we're making progress in the practice is are the defilements lessening in general? So, for example, do things that used to make us angry make us as angry or less now? Things that used to trigger us, do they trigger us less now? That's progress. And that only happens over time, so that's more like happens with training, and it can't happen by an act of will. Things we had greed for, is it less now? So that's more the signposts that's showing us that we're making progress. Or if we get criticized, how much does that affect us? If we get praised, how much does that affect us? How much does all the worldly winds affect us? And how much the worldly winds affect us is going to be proportionate to how much I, me, and mine there is still inside. So, we might... I was just meeting with somebody, and I related a story of when I was in Anagarika, which is a little bit embarrassing to talk about, but it's a good practice story. And that when we first come to this, we can be very, very emotionally sensitive and vulnerable, and we can have mental states that we didn't think we were capable of. Like, we can react sometimes like as if we're a 3-year-old. Well, where did that come from? And so like the littlest things I found would set me off in ways that I wouldn't get set off before. So like we have this rule as a monk that when we go to check if we're going to go to use the bathroom, we're supposed to clear our throat. So we had one flush toilet at the time in the old house that we had. So we had almost no facilities here. And there was a visiting Ajahn, and he was in the bathroom, and I needed to use the bathroom, so I just knocked on the door. I didn't know to clear my throat. I knocked on the door. And then Ajahn Amaro was walking by, and he said, here we don't, he didn't say it harshly or anything, he just said, we don't knock on the door, you just clear your throat. And I like burst into tears and like ran out of the room. And I reflected on it later, like, because the way I thought about it immediately after, like the next day, was like, that was the stupidest reaction ever. Like he wasn't even strong with me or anything. But then I thought about it much later, when I had a little bit more wisdom, and thought, oh, that was because there was I, me, and mine. It was I never make mistakes. I'm doing everything perfectly, and that's why that came up. So that didn't happen that many times when I was in Anagarika, but it was it happened a few times. And and I even remember, even at a like a circle meeting, sharing with the community, like I've just got all this stupid emotional garbage and I need to throw it all away, and that's right practice. So no, that's definitely not correct. I mean, the Ajahn Pasino and Ajahn Amaro were there, and they were just kind of like taking stock and just wondering like how are we going to teach this one, but it's more about the I, me, and mine, and the suffering too. How much do we suffer over things? Because we can, we can be attached to our suffering too. There can be a lot of I, me, and mine in our suffering also. So like part of us wants to stop suffering, but then the suffering is that which is familiar. So there's a fear of not suffering. I think that's what Ajahn Buddhadasa is talking about when he says that the dukkha of a happy person and the dukkha of a good person and the dukkha of a bad person. The dukkha of a bad person is they might want to be a good person, but being bad is what's familiar. So there's the fear of the unfamiliar, and so we don't want to let go of that which we know. It's awful and it's miserable, but at least I know what's happening. At least it's known, it's familiar.
And so I'm just wondering, or maybe this is more just to Ajahn Kai. He kind of talks about like not wanting to be or having being a mother, a child, or starting a family. And he talks about if they knew the truth, they would shave their heads. But in a culture like Thailand, where it's uncommon for even a woman to make those decisions, like how is it in Thailand, that pressure of like starting a family?
I don't know that I fully understand your question. It's kind of like, is it uncommon to have a kind of like feeling distress starting a family, right?
Just because Buddhism is so rich in Thailand, the culture, but if some people decide that they don't want to start a family and maybe become monastics, or maybe not, maybe that would be too far for them, but is there a middle way?
I mean, for most of the monks or monastics in Thailand, I believe most of them start from the culture, not from the dukkha.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe some of them start from the dukkha, but in Thailand, like for young adult, like men, when we reach the age of 20, it is a custom to ordain as a monk for a vasa before we can, let's say, like start having family, marriage,
Right.
something like that. But then, like, because this is what I have heard from many Kruba Ajahns' biographies, like their original intention is they just want to ordain just for 3 months, and then 50 years later they're still monk.
Right.
Yeah, like Luang Por Liam, I know his original intention is just he want to ordain for 3 months. Luang Por Chandi, my teacher, his original intention is the same. Luang Por Pasano as well.
Right.
I mean, yeah. It's kind of like you have this 5 power or 5 faculties: the faith, the effort, the mindfulness, the samadhi, and the discernment. It's kind of like balancing each other. The faith and the wisdom, the discernment, balancing each other. People might start from faith, but then eventually realize the wisdom, or they might come from the dukkha, that they have contemplated it for quite a long time and they go to the right direction. Like Luang Por Pasano, he likes to say this saying from the sutta, I believe it's in the Anguttara Nikaya, the book of 6. There's 2 results of suffering: more suffering or find a way out.
Right.
Yeah, it's balancing. But you say that Thai people are conditioned by Buddhism. To me, you have to, if you understand more closely, you have to divide them into different levels. Most of them are still okay. I'm Buddhist, but I don't want to ordain.
Right. Well, I was actually just thinking about maybe like more in rural areas where where families kind of like, oh, you're going to marry this person so we can join our families together, and the land and animals and all these things, where then the pressure is stronger to start a family, where the children or the young adults don't even have a choice.
I don't think much of the people will not think about that.
Oh, okay.
Not think about that.
So not like in India, where there's arranged marriages.
Yes,
Okay.
I mean, for Kruba Ajahns' biography that I've read, they're ordained out of faith, but they already have a seed of seeing this suffering. Like other people will see that, it is a pleasure, it is a happiness to have a family, to have a wife, to have a child, something so on and on like that. But for Kruba Ajahn, when I read the biography, most of them, they already have this seed of seeing dukkha as it is. They say, oh, you want to have 500 cows? If you read the sutta, the Buddha asks, you want to have 500 cows? How do you look after them?
500 problems.
Yeah, maybe.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Buddhist country, but you know, and people are happy to see monks, but a lot of the time they don't want their children to ordain. They're happy to have other people's children ordain, but not their children. Not always. There are some people who have so much faith that they're happy if their children ordain, but then most people, from my experience in 7 years in Thailand, it's like, yeah, they like monks, but they don't want their kids to become monks. So there's faith, but they also, you know, have that worldly side. Where, so I think Ajahn Buddhadasa's talk is brilliant. Like, all these old mothers here, you know, how was it being a mother? You know, they're all going to kind of so, you know, it's going to be very mixed. But I think the idea, the kind of romantic ideal we might have when we're young and, you know, getting married, it's like, think being a mother is going to be one way, but then the reality of it is always different. It's got the suffering part of it as well. So, I think it's like, yeah, just think about that. I think these truths apply to everybody, not just monks.